All right, let's get into this discussion. So the Democratic Alliance's MP, Crouse, is facing illegal action from the South African Human Rights Commission through the Equality Court. This comes after a 16-year-old video appeared online in which he can be heard using the K and N words. He has also been heard advocating for the murder of black people. We get the perspective now of the Institute of Race Relations with its legal executive director, Gabriel Crouse. Gabriel, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start here. I imagine that you've seen the video. A lot of us have seen the video. Your initial thoughts of what you see in that video?
Thank you so much. I haven't seen the whole video, which is 6 minutes long, but I did see an edited version posted on X, which starts with MP Crouse saying all black people should be killed, and he refers to black people with the hateful slur terms, the K word and the N word. And I was watching it in a crowded space, coffee shop, with my partner, and it was so alarming that I stopped watching the video after the first 10 or 15 seconds when he said this. But then, because it's my job, later in the day when I was in my office, I went back and watched the whole of that clip, which was 50 seconds long, and I got a different impression to what initially came across in the first 15 seconds. What happens in the rest of the clip is that Crouse says, then ANC youth leader Julius Malema has just been singing "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer," and Crouse didn't like that. He was criticizing that and was saying that there are double standards in the media, because if he were to say "kill all black people," he would be treated badly. But if a young black politician says "kill all Boers," they'll be celebrated. I think that context is important. The notion that he was sincerely advocating for killing all black people is dispelled by that context. So it sort of speaks to how you introduce this video. It doesn't speak to whether or not what he said was right or wrong. It could still be wrong. In fact, I think it was wrong, the way that he presented himself and his arguments, not just as a matter of style, but also on substance. Maybe we can get into that too.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's interesting what you've put forward, because we've heard the argument that this was in response to the singing of "Kill the Boer," and this, we could obviously talk about "Kill the Boer," and we'll do that in a moment. But I think there's something to be said about the fact that even if that was the context, the fact that the words were used, right? The K word, the N word. I mean, that surely that then excludes the very context that you're talking about here, right?
I don't know if you think words have a magical power to exclude context. Every time someone speaks, there's a context, there's a bigger picture. So I read historical books written by black and white authors, authors of all races, that sit in the library of the Institute of Race Relations. And when those books record how people speak, they often, write out the full word. That is reported speech. When you quote someone, it is obviously permissible to use any language, because what you're doing is you're reporting on their speech. I've also read court transcripts of murder cases, of cases of assault. It would be impossible to understand the cases against Vicky Momberg, for example, without understanding the language that's being used. So no word is so frightful, although, the K word is undoubtedly the most taboo word in South Africa. And I don't say it out loud here because I think children might be watching. I think that it's important to try and be sensitive.
Okay.
But
can I step in?
The matter is that in theater, in novels, in court procedures, in all kinds of very serious contexts, the word may be used. That doesn't say that.
Let me step in here, because I think it's important for us to just, sit with the point that you're making here about, whether or not a word like the K word can and cannot be used in and out of context. The reality is, Gabriel, is as a black woman, I'm more likely to tell you the impact of the K word a lot better than what you're able to do, right? The K word is not just a word that can be used in legal documentation as you're talking about to argue a certain point. The K word is a word that was used very, very intentionally during apartheid to be derogatory towards black people. So, I mean, the N word, for instance, has a similar, exactly the same connotation in the US. So can you actively sit here and say to me that the use of the K word in a video, so if we exclude the fact that he said kill the black people because you're responding to kill the Boer, but if we focus on the fact that he insisted on using the K word and the N word twice, can you actively say that the feelings of black people when they hear that word do not matter because of the context of the conversation?
No, I wouldn't say that. Of course, everyone's feelings matter.
Okay, so let's talk to me about this. What do you think about how the Democratic Alliance has responded to this? The suspension, is it harsh? Should it have been harsher?
I think that the suspension, my understanding, is pending a kind of investigation and disciplinary procedure where part of the process is figuring out what kind of punishment needs to be meted out. I think that to me, part of the concern, I'm honestly more concerned by the fact that MP Crouse put out a video recently in which he said that Orania is not racist. It strikes me as the case, maybe I'm misinformed, but it strikes me as the case that in Orania, only white people are allowed to reside there, and the way that town management describes it, they say, the settlement, that this is a cultural thing and only Afrikaners are allowed there. And of course, as a matter of fact, there are Afrikaans people that are black, that are white, and that are colored. But during apartheid, the Nationalist Party said that real Afrikaners are all white. And it seems to me to be the case that the leadership of Orania thinks that real Afrikaners are all white too. So that cultural story is a bit of a kind of fig leaf for a racial segregationist agenda.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried about that because it's something that he said very recently, because it's something that's germane to the political scene. The ANC has reportedly just let the Freedom Front Plus into the Government of National Unity, and they have said that they sort of support what's going on in Orania.
Yeah.
So that's a live issue. What happened 16 years ago, I think, is obviously different. Ronaldo knows that what he did and said was wrong because he apologized for it before. I think that what I was saying to you earlier was, if journalists are going to go around saying that he was calling for all black people to be killed, and then that's okay because he was doing it in response to Malema calling for all white people to be killed, then this would be a different conversation. If he was literally calling for genocide, I think no amount of time would be sufficient to redeem his character, and probably he should have gone to jail. However, if what he was doing was making a rhetorical point, then that's quite different. And that's a different use of the notion of context. Furthermore, insofar as he used the K word, that in itself is not, I think, a disqualifying offense. If a journalist reports an event, or if a writer, a playwright, a poet, whatever, there's all kinds of artistic contexts in which someone can use that word legitimately. However, if you're calling Malema, part of what disturbs me in that video is he says, Malema, that's black idiot or whatever, where he's using the racial predicate within a sling of insults. And that is hateful. And he's apologized for it. I don't know how far that apology goes. I think that's something to be investigated in light of the Orania comments, and they're going to have to figure out as a party where he stands. And I think that it's important for South Africans to have these conversations. And it is, I mean, the whole reason we're having this conversation, and you say that you've got a better grip on the words, full impact than I do, that might be the case. But the whole reason both of us are having this conversation, and that all South Africans that are interested in this country is going forward together, want this conversation to go right and according to the facts, is because we all know that apartheid was a stupid and evil system, and that it was a white supremacist system that degraded that humiliated black people, and that word was an essential tool amongst many, but most of those tools were violent in order to achieve that. So we know that this is important. It's just important also that in the new South Africa, we kind of stick to the facts.
Yeah, so what do you make then of the, I mean, it was just, what, around towards the tail end of May, really, that we saw the Supreme Court of Appeal, you know, again, stamping in that judgment that kill the Boer, that chant is not hate speech. I mean, was that a step in the wrong direction by the courts, in your view?
I mean, I think there's 2 points there. One is, to what extent do we want the courts to be deciding what's okay in South Africa? I think free people are free to criticize and ostracize people even for harmful speech or hateful speech without needing to rely on the courts. Often the problem with relying on the courts is the use of language is in itself so open to interpretation that it's very difficult to get a kind of reliable standard. The court judgment there was, to me, very concerning. Remember, the context was Senekal. The former president, Kgalema Motlanthe, said the day before the Senekal event that the country was on the brink of civil war. Over 10,000 EFF supporters were bussed in. Thousands of anti-farm murder protesters were there. I was in the middle of Senekal. There was barbed wire, police, cannons. You know, it was a very heavy-duty thing. People were very worried about people killing each other. And in that context, MP Ndlozi saying, call the fire brigade, go set things on fire, go and break things. There were physical altercations. There was, I mean, I was in the middle of an EFF crowd trying to ask people how their day was. And my life was threatened repeatedly. I was told politely by one of the leaders to just get out there because they couldn't keep me safe for much longer. It was a very incendiary circumstance. And I've been in other situations where EFF members have treated me with great respect and kindness. I think part of what was different that day was that the leaders were saying things like kill the Boer, kill the farmer. When you have an angry mob and you use that kind of language, I think it ought to be unacceptable in South Africa. I'm not making a court judgment here. I'm just making a judgment of common sense. Polling has indicated that most South Africans, including most black South Africans, the plurality of black South Africans, consider Julius Malema to be the most racist politician in the country. Of course, the evidence all points in that direction. Malema is clearly a racist. And his incendiary remarks
do you have that data? I mean, you're the Institute of Race Relations. Do you have the data that says that a lot of black people think that Julius Malema is a racist? Do you have the data?
Yes. Yes.
What is the data?
Well, the question was asked, which politician do you associate with being a racist? And Malema sort of got the most responses out of the politicians that were offered, including, you know, white politicians. So it's clear. I mean, there's kind of like a media line that black people can't be racist, which is absurd, of course. Malema has openly advocated for hatred towards towards multiple minority groups. He's sort of slurred all Indians as themselves being racist, which is another kind of racist remark. And most South Africans get it, although a lot of intellectuals and academics don't get it. I've noticed in the sort of course of the interviews that I've been doing here. Part of the reason this is important is that the government of national unity is trying to build itself on the kinds of values that I think the EFF reject, that the Freedom Front Plus rejects insofar as they support Orania, that the DA, the ANC, the IFP, at least on paper, embrace. And I think that it's important at this juncture in history for the practical concerns of ordinary people that want everyone across races to work together to strike through. The kinds of remarks that brought us into this discussion today are not normal everyday behavior. Another data point that's extremely important is when asked, have you personally experienced any form of racism in the last 5 years? The overwhelming majority of black South Africans polled said no. We haven't personally experienced any form of racism in the last 5 years. This is not the day-to-day thing. I think anyone can reflect on their own lives, going to the shops, hanging out with their friends, going to church, to synagogue, to mosque, going to a sport event, whatever it is, where South Africans come together, we come together well. But there are, of course, people, leaders who try to exploit the historical grievances,
Right.
who try to rely on all kinds of negative stereotypes to get their way forward. And as South Africans, I think common sense South Africans all need to stand together and say, no, we don't want that.